Welcome and thank you for joining us to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting. This is 9 a.m. Tuesday, July 29th. Please join me, and the first item is Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is a citizen input for items that are not on the agenda as a public hearing. Is there any citizen input? What about online? Is there anybody with the raised hand feature? All right. So one order of business is our consent agenda today. We have 6 items, a couple sets of minutes. Any discussion or a motion?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
And I'll second it. I just did want to make a comment that the IDD funding one, I believe it's number 3. The numbers actually don't add. They've missed decimal points on that Excel spreadsheet that's attached. And I did talk to Cheryl Smallman about it. I said, if you're going to give us a statement, I want the numbers to actually make sense. So they need to expand their column.
Right. Thank
Anyway,
you very much. No, good detail. So with that comment, any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Dare,
yes.
and Chair votes yes. Thank you. Item number 7, appointment of Deschutes County Sheriff. So this has been a process. Want to thank everybody for joining us here today. We have wonderful people stepping up for this opportunity. Obviously, it's a frustrating moment 6 months after a general election, but it brought us here today. So with that, any other introductory statements, or somebody want to lead off?
Yeah, I'll just say I want to thank all of the candidates who have come forward and offered to serve as our interim sheriff. They each have excellent things to offer to our community in this role. Some of the things I'd like to note are, the incredible character and integrity of the candidates. Some of them demonstrate a very sound understanding of the budget. Some of them demonstrated strong executive and management experience and training. Some of them have a deep and meaningful connection to the staff of the sheriff's office already. There are decades and decades of service represented among these candidates in law enforcement. And many of them shared with me just incredibly compelling visions for what the sheriff's office can be and can do for our community. So I hope the voters are so lucky as to have this much good material to choose from next year in 2026.
Thank you. Comments?
Well, we definitely want to smooth our sheriff's office out. In our turbulent times, it's so important, the job that you all do, all 245 employees of our Deschutes County Sheriffs. I so appreciate that. When I saw what happened, last night in New York, and that man whose wife is pregnant and has 2 children, 2 little boys, I believe. Anyway, those things are so touching. And I know that every day you serve our citizens and our tourists. It's really important to have a leader that will carry us through the next 18 months and then give the actual citizens and voters of Deschutes County an opportunity to choose the next sheriff. It's a really heavy decision that we've had to make today. I am pleased with the candidates that have stepped up, and I feel that we owe it to the 244 employees that are in our sheriff's office and to our citizens to make our very best determination of bringing stability, continuity, and a clear vision forward for our sheriff's office. So thank you all for running.
So obviously, we haven't done this before, and we've all done our homework and communicated with each one of the folks that have stepped up here. I want to do a special thanks to, just the whole organizations. We do have jail operations, rural patrol, detectives, search and rescue, marine patrol, emergency management, court security, the administration that probably keeps everything going there, command staff itself. So there's a great team that already does serve the people here. We're in a great opportunity at Deschutes County to be able to have a well-funded department that does serve the people. So as I say, with that, how do we want to kick this off? As I say, we procedurally.
I mean, before we start naming names, I would also like to just share some of my thought process on what we need right now. There are many things that I want in a sheriff in the near term and the long term. But we at this unique moment, we have some real immediate needs. And three that I just want to mention that are going to be top of brain for me are number one, I believe we need to give the sheriff's office employees a leader that they can believe in and that they can trust, and that they can get behind as they are trying to do their important work from day to day for the next 10 months. They have many of them have lived under a cloud for not just the last 7 months, but for years. You know, a dark leadership cloud, and it's an incredibly important priority for me to change that and to give them someone they can again believe in and get behind. The other immediate need I see is to continue progress in improving fiscal responsibility, efficiency, and sound budgeting at the sheriff's office. This budget cycle has been positive in that respect. The budget that was passed by the County Board of Commissioners and the Budget Committee just a few months ago was a better sheriff's office budget than I have seen in the 5 years that I've served as commissioner. So I hope that can continue. Lastly, I want to say that we will have an election in less than 10 months. And that will produce all kinds of dynamics inside a sheriff's office, regardless of who we appoint as interim. And so I hope that the interim sheriff can create the conditions inside the sheriff's office for us to have a fair and healthy election next year. We have not had fair and healthy elections for many cycles at this point. And it will be really important for the interim sheriff to ensure that people inside the sheriff's office are not punished for throwing their hat in the ring and saying that they want to run. It will also be important that interim sheriff does not use the office to promote their preferred candidates. We need a sheriff who is going to help us enter a new era where we can have sheriff's office elections that we can be proud of in our community, not that we are ashamed of. So I hope that all of the candidates can keep those three things in mind, and yeah, those are the things that I've been trying to work through in my head as we move towards this decision today.
Any other thoughts, Commissioner?
I said them.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I'll step into it. I would like to start off by proposing that Captain Ty Rupert be the proposed sheriff for this appointment. There's a name for us.
And I can second that. At this time, I think it's really important to have someone steady. It's an 18-month interim position. We really need steady. We need someone who's been there maybe a bit longer. And I know there's a lot of challenges. It's just like with this job. We have 22 departments in the county. There are probably 22 different smaller departments in the sheriff's office. And I just feel like that Ty Rupert could be the person to lead in this interim 18 months.
Any thoughts?
I'm not opposed to appointing Captain Rupert into this role. I do want to say that, uh, yeah, like I said, my most urgent criteria is giving the sheriff's office employees a leader that they can believe in and trust. I know that Captain Rupert has, a solid a solid reputation and solid relationships to do that. But when the sheriff's office and Sheriff's Employees Association did their internal poll, Lieutenant McLaughlin was ranked a little bit higher. So I do want us to give consideration to that. It is not the only factor that we should be considering, but I do think it is an important factor for us to consider. And again, if our priority is to give the sheriff's office employees, a leader that they can believe in and get behind, then I think that they have spoken on that. So I'm not quite ready to vote for that measure that motion yet.
So I would just acknowledge, spending time with each of the folks that have stepped up has been an honor and a privilege. I mean, there's relationships that have been built. Just I've even talking to the folks that have stepped up. As a commissioner, I've always, really tried to make that outreach and relationship with, anybody that's serving the people of Deschutes County. But man, this sure opened up the door to have a lot more conversations than we ever had, especially in public safety. So I do want to acknowledge that. I mean, I've got some new friends basically out of this process just by getting down to it, talking a little bit more seriously about what we do, who we are, and why we're here. So putting this group together, this team together, sheriff is an interesting spot because, the Board of Commissioners, I think of when emergencies, when big bad things happen, sheriff is right there with the Board of Commissioners for the emergency response, emergency designation, calling the governor's office if we need to. So that's part of the org chart of Deschutes County. Sheriff is right up there with that. Also, a couple other thoughts, just as I'm thinking through, let's get real focused and stay focused on the budget. For every dollar we have, let's make sure we're spending about 99 or 99 and a half cents and not $1. So it's simple as that. We can spend the money we have, but not more than. And then also, there's just this one entity called Deschutes County also. The liability of the work we do, sheriff's office, obviously with the jail operations and rural patrol is the risky business in itself. But there's only one entity here called Deschutes County, and that's what we've learned over the years. Let's work together, be open, honest, and communicate. Ask for help when we need to. Leadership sometimes can be a contact sport, and it's just a really interesting time. But with those statements, as I say, I'm comfortable with Captain Rupert at this time. And as I say, there's wonderful candidates that have stepped up.
Yes, the depth of the candidates was really, it was really empowering to see that many people really wanted to make a difference. And of course, I believe September 11th, you can sign up if you're going to run in the next election. And if we have so many candidates, that would be in the May election. So, it's an opportunity out there. If you weren't selected today, I would just say, well, it gives you, time to go forward. But in the interim, we really do need to all work together. So far, I think we had, a vehicle fire on Highway 97 north of Bend, like almost one a day last week. It's incredibly challenging times. We had a vehicle left on the railroad tracks out, north of Bend, a couple weeks ago. I mean, the challenges just never end. And what we're trying to help with our homeless population by moving them to more of a managed location, we need a partnership. And I feel so fortunate that we have great teams. We have amazing people. I see some of the people that work in the jail in the back row, and I so appreciate what they do, and I would hope that the new leader would really promote their program of helping people transition and getting off of their substance use disorder and getting help for their mental illness. We've really got to make that difference. When you consider in our jail, I believe the latest survey was 91% of those people, of those couple hundred people were mentally ill or they had substance use disorder, 91%. So keep doing what you're doing, Captain Schultz and your team. It's incredibly important. The crime yesterday, I was trying to get a number from our DA, Steve Gunnels, over how many homicide cases do we have now accumulated? I think it's up over 21. Things have really changed, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to start moving back to the way Deschutes County used to be, where we only had one or two a year. Wouldn't that make your life so much more enjoyable? Because I know that our crime factor has really added to your record keeping, the crime. It's really been to me overwhelming. So please, as part of the team, I think it's important that everyone realize you are appreciated. And I'm so thankful for everyone that did come and talk to me. Like every place I would run into them. I really appreciate. Yes, you never know.
So how about a formal motion?
Okay, so I will move Captain Rupert being the interim sheriff for the next 18 months.
There's a draft board
Oh,
order in
okay.
your packet.
Get a little bit more, yeah,
Oh, the order. Yes, I'm so sorry.
here we go.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I move to approve board order number 2025-031, appointing a selected candidate to the sheriff's office of Deschutes County, that being Captain Ty Rupert.
And I'll second it. Yeah, so it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang.
I'm going to abstain. I wouldn't vote against Captain Rupert.
Yeah.
I very much believe he will be a good leader. This is a complicated decision, and I'm not all the way. I'm not there yet.
Thank you very much. So at this time, Chair will vote yes. So congratulations, Ty Rupert, Captain, being promoted to the Sheriff of Deschutes County at this time. So at this time, yeah, we can get a photo opportunity, possibly whatever we want to do here. Maybe take a few minute break, and then we'll reconvene our board meeting.
Did you call for the vote?
Vote.
You did not call for the vote.
Commission. Yeah, no, that's what I was doing, wasn't it?
Well,
Because he abstained.
I moved and seconded, but you actually then have to.
I
call.
seconded.
Yes.
Well, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang abstaining, and Chair votes yes. So sorry if that was a procedural issue there, but congratulations. And as I say, for the whole team, let's all work together. We'll see you out at the county fair. Thank you very much for what you're doing in the community. Public safety is always number one in our goals and objectives at Deschutes County also. So yeah, let's bring the team together and work together.
Yeah, can I just also say that one of the great benefits of having a chance to talk to all these candidates in detail over the last couple of weeks, month, has been that I have learned how much valuable experience, background, insights they all have on the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office and where it can go. And I hope that that's not lost in the coming months. I know that Captain Rupert is really good at listening to people and at absorbing what other people have to offer. So I feel very confident that won't be lost. But I just want to reemphasize that there are so many people inside and outside the agency with so much to offer to the new sheriff, the new interim sheriff, that I hope will be taken full advantage of. Thank you.
So there's a tentative, a proposed time for 8:30 a.m. Thursday morning, July 31st, courtroom C, sheriff oath of office. So that would be the last day of the current sheriff, and midnight that night will be taken over as sheriff August 1st. So oath of office, 8:30 a.m. at the courthouse this Thursday morning.
And I just want to say that I will not be at that ceremony. My dear Uncle Bob passed away at 87. He'd been married to my Aunt Mary Lou almost 60 years. He missed it by 2 days. I don't know why he had to leave early, but his funeral is Thursday morning, so I will be attending that.
No,
Okay, with that, we'll-
I'm sorry. I will let everyone know. I won't be able to make it either. I have as one of the members of the Oregon Transportation Commission, I have responsibilities with the Southeast Oregon Area Commission on Transportation Thursday morning.
Well, I'll be there. So there we go. So congratulations, Sheriff Rupert. So we'll practice saying that, Sheriff Rupert. So congratulations. As I say, we'll take about a 10-minute break and reconvene our board meeting at 9:30. Okay, we're back to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting. There's a little bit of media coverage still happening on the new sheriff's selection right now. But at this time, item number 8, resolution adopting recreational immunity as provided by the state legislature.
Morning, Commissioners. Dave Doyle, County Attorney. You'll recall last year we did a resolution that was triggered by the Oregon legislature passing Senate Bill 1576. They've passed a new Senate bill this latest session, 179. And so we see the need to expand and readopt our recreational immunity resolution, and that's what's before you, 2025-036. The significant change in that is that it does expand to include improved right-of-ways. The resolution last year didn't speak to improved right-of-ways. So I think of something akin to Spring River Road and Harper Bridge, where we've made those improvements to the right-of-way. An argument could have been made prior to this that since we had improved the right-of-way, the recreational immunity didn't apply. But the legislature has addressed that, and so now we have that recreational immunity with regard to improved right-of-ways as well.
But I think this whole thing stems from somebody slipping on a wooden bridge in the coastal area. I don't forget what county.
That was part of it. Yeah, I think it was Tillamook or.
But yeah, I mean, it's a wooden bridge and it's slippery when it's wet and somebody broke their leg and then it was like, uh-oh, how do we get clear on the responsibility there? And not that I want anybody to be subject to danger, but yeah, how do you keep track of everything? So this is adopting, as I say, the ORSs that has been put in place with the legislature.
Right. This just makes as clear as can be that the county is availing itself of all recreational immunity options that are out there with regard to any liability claims that are asserted against it. And in a county like ours, it is so recreation based, it's really more important for us than maybe some other counties that don't have quite the recreational base that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dave. Can you remind me again? So besides improved right-of-ways, what kind of recreational amenities or facilities or infrastructure do we operate at the county that we need to be concerned about?
Well, we have a lot of unimproved right-of-ways that are just dirt shoulders and whatnot that we know people utilize and access to gain access to certain recreational areas, rivers in particular, waterways. And so historically, that was always covered by the recreational immunity. And then there was some issues with some of the litigation, including the case that Commissioner Devone referenced to. And so the bill last year in the legislature essentially reestablished that recreational immunity, and it focused on those unimproved pieces of land and drew a distinction to when they're improved or when you charge a fee. And so the legislature went back in this year and I'm not sure who did the lobbying and how that all went down, but in any event, they passed this Senate Bill 179 that provided that improved right-of-ways also fell under that umbrella of recreational immunity when they were being utilized for purposes of gaining access and utilizing recreational facilities.
How does how are like sidewalks in Tumlo or Terrebonne, construed in this whole discussion?
Sidewalks are typically owned by the adjacent property, and often they're under private ownership.
Okay.
So I could see a scenario where one could argue that a sidewalk would fall under that umbrella, and the resolution you did last year, as well as the one proposed this year, asked that be interpreted as broadly as possible for adjacent properties as well that might be under private ownership if they're being utilized for recreational purposes. Sidewalk law in Oregon is essentially dangerous condition of property, and that the test there is it's kind of a unique test. If it's open and obvious, there's typically no liability because you should have seen it. If it's de minimis, it's typically no liability because it's de minimis. But if it's something in between, then there can be liability. And very often that's where the fight is. Was it open and obvious? Was it de minimis? What's in between? And, de minimis, on a sidewalk, for instance, different slabs, if it's a 7-inch difference delta between the two adjacent slabs, one would argue that's open and obvious. And if you trip over it, you weren't paying attention. And likewise, if it's a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch, it's probably de minimis and you might want to pick up your feet a little more when you walk. But what if it's 3/4 of an inch? Is that open and obvious? Is it de minimis? I don't know. And that's where lawyers and judges and juries, make their money. That's what they have to decide and deal with. So, and we've had sidewalk cases in the time I've been here at the county. We had one out in front of the Gray Building years ago where a person tripped and fell and hit her head. And the real issue in that was factually was whether it was de minimis or whether it was open and obvious. The case ended up going away on a procedural basis, but the actual issue, had it gone forward, would have been that very.
And the sidewalk was shaved down to make it more smooth, probably.
See, we do that here.
Yeah.
You walk around, you'll see the where they grind them down think about once a year. Lee has his crew go out and mark them and grind them. And that's for that very reason, that typically, to the extent we have any defects, they're probably de minimis. Ideally, they're de minimis and no more. They're certainly not open and obvious. So Lee's on top of those. He and his crew does a real good job with dealing with that. And obviously, there wouldn't be any recreational immunity for our sidewalks here associated with this building, because there's no recreational purpose here. So again, it's ultimately the legislature, I believe, is trying to restore what was historically in place before the court decisions came about, and that's their prerogative to do it. They've done it, and we just want to make sure we avail ourselves procedurally of it in the event we have any claims.
And this was a high priority of the Association of Oregon Counties. So all 36 counties came together and said, yes, this is a priority for our level of government.
Yeah, the alternative is you just start shutting down access, and I don't think anyone wanted to see that. Obviously, if you have to pay for access, that's a different story, and recreational immunity doesn't apply when there's a fee involved. Now you're dealing with more generalized, negligence standards. I paid a fee to come in and use your facility, and, was it reasonable? Were there, dangerous conditions that I wouldn't normally be aware of? And if they are, you probably need to warn me. And if you didn't, then I may have a claim against you. And Mount Bachelor's a good example of that. They're in that category where they get claims pretty, I think, annually, and their response pretty much is you're doing something that's kind of dangerous. You're skiing or snowboarding down a sheet of ice, so maybe you need to be careful. And some of the lawsuits I think have been successful against them, some haven't, and it's pretty much fact driven. But that's why they can't, say, for instance, avail themselves of recreational immunity, because you have to pay to go up there. I think typically, I don't know if there's a way to not pay and go up there.
Big disclaimer too.
I'm pretty confident they're not letting you on the lift without paying.
big
Maybe if you want to
disclaimer.
hike up the mountain, I suppose you could probably try to
Yeah.
do that on your own. and
So this
come
is a-
down.
Adopting recreational immunity as defined by ORS chapters and Senate Bill 179.
Further adopting, because we had the board do this last year.
Yep. Okay. Is there a motion?
I move approval of resolution number 2025-036.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair will vote yes. Thank you for the discussion. At this time, item number 9, proposed road name change. So I know we were going to try to have a work session and then put this maybe on the consent agenda, but we're going to hear about the whole thing right now.
Exactly. Yeah. For the record, Commissioners, Tarek Rawlings, Senior Transportation Planner with Community Development Department and the Road Department. And thanks to Brenda for condensing this into a meeting on Tuesday. And just as was mentioned today is consideration of a proposed name change under road name change. This is county file number 247-25-000069-RN. And it would deal with assigning a name of Wisteria Drive to a currently unnamed gravel driveway just west of Old Ben Redmond Highway, north of Bemis Lane, which is a much smaller road that stems west also from Old Ben Redmond Highway. There's been a public process since January. We've sent notice out, received a very limited number of comments, and really this culminates in, similar to most of the other road name changes you've done, I assume, that with a board order approving that road name change for that segment. assigned to a specific location. So that's in your packet today. It's order number 2025-029. We've reached final approval of the administrative decision as of July 25th. And so our Title 16 requirements for road naming require that we present this board order for approval within a 10-day window after that July 25th. So here we are, 4 days later, we're right in the middle of that. And we've had no appeals filed. We've had no oppositional comments. We have had a few public comments that were requesting Wisteria Drive as the name amongst a few other choices for their preferred road name. So we just went with what the adjoining property owners preferred. It's not a duplicate of anything else within the assessor's records or other road names in the county. So it's able to be approved in terms of addressing, road naming, things like that. So as one sort of just follow-up piece, this will require these adjoining property owners to change their address to Wisteria Drive. They've been made aware of that. They have 180 days from the approved board order in which to do that. And I'm available for any questions you might have.
So all the properties are Old Ben Redmond Highway addresses currently, the ones that aren't on the road?
Exactly. And that's kind of what prompts this, is that it's collectively a difficult situation for EMS, fire services to try to find these interior lots from this pretty circuitous gravel driveway. And if you can just picture, there's 7 lots that front on this driveway, and the most interior of those still has an Old Ben Redmond Highway address. That gets complicated and can just make the agency's lives a little bit more difficult, but it helps with addressing, mail delivery, all sorts of other services.
So I have a technical question. Does Wisteria do well here?
I'm not sure.
I just got back from the Bouchard Gardens, 54 acres, and I'm like, whoa. Yeah, I mean, I love Wisteria. I just wondered if it does well here.
I haven't seen personally a lot of it, but I think in some of we've seen vineyards here. I'm sure it's possible.
You think it's possible? Okay, maybe I'll try and plant some. I wonder if the deer love it. Yeah,
The extension master gardeners would know.
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there any costs associated with this? I know there's some signage. Do the property owners pay, or do the county just picks up a new sign requirement?
The county in this instance, because it was county initiated with kind of in partnership with our fire agency partners, we would pick up the cost for that road name or the road sign being
Yeah.
installed and produced. But we're trying to figure out an internal process for. This isn't a very common occurrence, but if this does come up over and over, if there's the need for some sort of set aside funding. But for right now, these are one-off enough that this is, just internally paid for.
But not the property owners, it's the county.
Yeah, exactly. Really the only requirement on the property owners is to change their address within 180 days.
Great.
No more questions. I'll move approval of board order number 2025-029, assigning the name of Wisteria Drive to an existing unnamed gravel driveway stemming west from Old Ben Redmond Highway.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
and Chair will vote yes. Thank you so much. Yes.
Great morning.
Thank you, Chuck.
Item number 10, work session in preparation for a public hearing on a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Hallie King, Senior Planner, Community Development. This item is a work session in preparation for a public hearing coming up next Wednesday, August 6th. This is county file number 247-24-000-839-PA and 840-ZC. And this application before the board again is a plan amendment zone change request submitted by Mackenzie Meadow Village LLC, affecting 58 acres just outside City of Sisters. I've got the location map in your packet. Again, it directly is north of City of Sisters, city limits, and the current urban growth boundary. And the applicant and property owner would like to change the comprehensive plan designation from forest to rural residential exception area, with the corresponding zone change from forest use to multiple use agricultural 10. And the application also includes a request for a Goal 4 exception. Goal 4 is the statewide land use planning goal related to forest lands. Again, location-wise, just adjacent to City of Sisters on the northwest side of the city. Sisters High School is to the southwest, with the Trout Creek Conservation Tract also directly to the west. The Tollgate County subdivision, which is zoned RR10, is northwest of the subject property. And so we'll have again, the public hearing will be next Wednesday. Because this is affecting resource lands and includes a Goal 4 exception request, the application will be heard de novo by the commissioners, who are the final local decision makers. We had the initial hearing with the hearings officer back on April 7th, with the hearings officer issuing a recommendation of approval on June 25th, following a 28-day open record period. And during that initial proceeding, there's significant public involvement, which I anticipate we'll see as well at the hearing next week as well. A couple of things wanted just to note for the board. We did receive a comment from Department of Land Conservation and Development as part of that initial hearing, noting a few areas where they found that the application was missing criteria and didn't address all the applicable criteria. Through the open record period, the applicant responded to DLCD's comments, and again, the hearings officer found that their responses were adequate to address the criteria. We also received a joint comment from the Sisters Urban Growth Boundary Steering Committee, City Council, and Planning Commission, noting that they are currently in a UGB prioritization study process, again, separate from this application, and noting that they don't have a position on the matter, but are obviously interested in the potential outcome of this application. And again, purpose of today is to set the table for the hearing, answer any questions from the commissioners or any items you are looking for next Wednesday. The applicant will give their presentation and go through their application at the hearing. We did include the standard time limits in our notice. 3 minutes for the general public, 10 for any agencies, 30 for the applicant, and 10 for applicant rebuttal. But of course, the commissioners can modify those at their discretion. Yeah, and so with that, I'll stop there. If there's any questions, we'll do, obviously I'll give my staff report as well next Wednesday prior to the public testimony.
I have a lot of questions,
Okay.
like at least 10 or 15. But anyone else wants to ask questions first?
So just a couple thoughts. It's understood this is a separate process than the Sisters Urban Growth Boundary. So this is truly on our table, on our plate as a rezone request at the edge of our urban growth boundary, but not part of that process. And I'll mention this during the public hearing. I did drive that neighborhood. I happened to be in the Sisters area, so I zigzagged through there and I saw the new construction of the area and kind of the stubbed out roads that are out there. So as I say, there's people visioning stuff out there probably, but I mean, and then also the fact that this, I don't know all the ownership, but the Willits family is associated with this. I don't know if it's if they're the only folks behind this or whatever, but just information that I know. So we'll acknowledge that as we're opening up the public process.
Thank you, Chair Devon.
Yeah, I mean, when we open the hearing, I'll also acknowledge that I had discussions with Bill Willits both about the UGB expansion and about this, that their interest in rezoning prior to the submittal of the application. Yeah, I made it very clear to him that I could not discuss this with him any further at that point. And coming up to that point, but we had some early kind of background conversations. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and jump right into some of these questions. Recognizing that this application is not about the UGB expansion, I still want to ask a question or two about that process. Because the applicant, when it's right there in the hearing transcript, came right out at the beginning and said, my goal is to be included in the urban growth boundary expansion. So one of the things I did want to understand, and that was part of the discussion by the hearings officer was, how much preference do you really get if you're MUA 10 versus EFU in an urban growth boundary expansion deliberation process? I mean, I know that there is an advantage, that the state wants a city to look at MUA and RR10 lands first, but like what does that look like? How much friction or how cumbersome is it to get EFU zoned lands into a urban growth boundary expansion? I mean, from some of the history that people have relayed to me around the city of Bend's last urban growth boundary expansion, it is quite a lot of friction. But I just want to understand that a little bit better. Again, I appreciate that this application is not to be included in the urban growth boundary, but it is, we need to be upfront and honest that that is clearly the property owner's intention.
Mhm. Yeah, no, great question, Commissioner Chang. And I do want to just be careful that we're not bringing in the UGB argument, which I think, again, the hearings officer noted that, this application does have to stand on its own merits. Certainly that the UGB, might be informative. But yeah, this does have to stand on its own. But kind of to your question, the state law gives a prioritization hierarchy, if you will, for lands to be brought into an urban growth boundary. And it's very specific, outlined in state statute. Generally, first preference or first priority is given to urban reserve lands, exception lands, and non-resource lands. So you think your rural residential zoning, with then subsequent preference given to generally farm and forest lands that are non-high value, and then last priority is farm and forest lands that are high value. And then essentially from there, you look at suitability, you rank the lands, and that's all what the city does, kind of separate. You rank those lands and look at suitability of each site based on what the need is. So if it's a housing need, if it's an industrial lands need, you then look at those prioritization of lands and the suitability to serve that need. And so yeah, so that's kind of the short version of that UGB process.
Okay. But there's no kind of like simple measure of, okay, that's a 4 in difficulty versus a 7 in difficulty or something like that. It's
I mean, there may be, again, I think that's exactly what the City of Sisters is working through with their steering committee and looking at each of the lands up for evaluation.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I also had some questions about goal 4, about kind of the way that the state land use planning system thinks about forests. These are marginal forest lands in a couple of senses. As in terms of timber production, we're basically on the edge of the ecotone where ponderosa pine can grow. So ponderosa pine is going to grow really slow in this spot. So as there, if you were looking for land to grow ponderosa pine, this would not be it. If you were a tree farmer. That said, this is the margin of the area where ponderosa pine can grow right now. With climate change, there's an expectation that the range of ponderosa pine is going to change dramatically. These places on the edge are going to get too dry or get too burned to support ponderosa pine in the future, and literally we'll see ponderosa pine receding up the east slope of the Cascades. It might go higher up in elevation than it currently is, but um, we are on the margin of that forest land. So if in a future scenario, this is land that is highly vulnerable to not being forest land anymore. Um, I'm wondering how the state land use system, values that, right? Do we only value forest land if it is capable of producing timber, or do we value forest land for all the other values associated with forest land as well? Um, and if this is land on the margin that is highly vulnerable to not being forest land in the future, do we in some senses place even more value on retaining this as forest land because it is so vulnerable to loss? We are so vulnerable to losing forested acres in the future. And, I don't, the state land use planning system was created a long time ago before we had to think about, things like, the migration of species, in response to climate change. But I'm just wondering if you can give me any insights on, essentially how we value forest land in the land use system.
Well, and for us, I'm just thinking through the process. For us, this is our work session in preparation. So these would be kind of questions for the applicant. Is that your mindset? Or information you're looking for from an applicant?
These are things that the applicant will want to present, but it's dependent upon how the state land use planning system values forests, right? And that's something that, just as a foundational primary piece of information for me, I want.
Yeah, and I'm just referring to, this is kind of work session prepping because we can have these discussions just procedurally.
I mean, this is
I'm referring to, yeah.
At stake in this hearing is whether we want to grant a Goal 4 exception or not. So I want to understand what Goal 4 is about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, and those are great questions, and I'll definitely taking notes, kind of give a sort of exception overview as part at the hearing. I think generally speaking, one of the first kind of prong of the Goal 4 exception is the applicant has to demonstrate the reasons justify why the state policy embodied in the applicable goal should not apply. And so that ties directly to what the definition of forest lands is under state statute. And I can again include this in my presentation, but it's effectively, lands that are acknowledged as forest lands, or in the case of a plan amendment, forest lands include lands that are suitable for commercial forest uses, including adjacent or nearby lands, and other forested lands that maintain soil, air, water, and fish and wildlife resources. So that's where during this exceptions process, the applicant's asking for essentially there's a unique circumstance that warrants a local override of that goal or that policy. And so that's the, the burden of proof on the applicant. They did provide a soil study and a tree growth study of the property, indicating it is predominantly class 7 soils, and that the trees in their current growth habit are not mercantile trees. But certainly that is something that the commissioners will be, weighing as part of their decision in accordance with those the exception criteria.
What does recantable mean?
Mercantile.
Or merchant. Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thought that was a new word. I'm like, oh, what was that?
So yeah, and I read that paragraph as well, but that, maintain soil, air, water, or fish and wildlife habitat. I think that's basically what I'm asking about, is how important is that? Okay. So question. Um, uh, I wanted to ask about the Highway 20 scenic corridor. Um, so we have an overlay. And um, that overlay would affect any proposed developments, regardless of whether this is F2 or MUA 10, et cetera. Does that, do those scenic corridor requirements land differently for land that is zoned differently? Or, I mean, basically, if you've got to mine the scenic corridor, you've got to mine the scenic corridor regardless.
Great question. Correct. The LM overlay would not change as part of this application. So it would apply to any structures within that overlay need to basically comply with the landscape management chapter, which then further breaks down whether the structure is visible or non-visible from the Highway 20 corridor. And the applicant indicates in their application that any structure in that space would be non-visible due to the intervening trees and distance
Right.
from the highway. But yeah, it would not change. That would not go away as part of this application.
I mean, just taking a quick look at the plan view of this property, the density of the trees between this property and the highway is substantially higher than the density of the trees on the subject property. And being familiar with some of the fuels reduction, forest thinning activity that happens on the national forest in that area, I can tell you that it's very possible that the density of the trees between the highway and this property could be reduced for fuels reduction concerns. So I just wanted I wanted to understand whether we actually have any kind of uh, criteria or guiding principles around how far can you see from the highway. This is quarter mile maybe. At certain points, other parts of it are much farther away from the highway. But at the points that are closer to the highway, if it's only 1,000 feet or a little more than that, is it physically possible to see the highway from there? If there were less trees I, uh, so I, that was a question for CDD. Is there any kind of rule of thumb about how far you can see from the highway?
Yeah, no, great question, Commissioner Chang. And so at the time, if and when a property is developed at the time of their building permit or land use application submittal, an applicant will generally, indicate if they're applying for visible or non-visible, and staff does a site visit to make sure we agree with their assessment. Looking at the view from the highway, can you, to the best of our ability, do we think we can see the structure? And even if you can see a portion of it, that puts someone into the visible review category.
Mm-hmm.
Non-visible, we say it would need to be effectively invisible from the road at the time, at the time of application.
But we don't have any kind of rules of thumb, like how far can you see from the highway?
No, not in the code. Yeah, we don't have a codified distance.
But
Yeah.
how far from the highway does does the LM overlay extend?
Quarter mile.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, if a structure is outside of that overlay, there's no landscape management
Okay.
criteria that would apply.
So you would think that they set a quarter mile from the highway as the LM as the extent of the overlay zone because maybe you could see a quarter mile from the highway.
Yeah, and we certainly do have properties where there's 0 trees between the feature and the structure, and that absolutely would be visible. But yeah, every property is got a little different nuance given, vegetation, structures, or topography that might render it visible or not visible.
And I guess one other kind of to follow this line of thought a little farther, um, uh, I'm sure not the entire property doesn't fall in the LM overlay then.
Correct, it does not.
And so can you basically, if, if through this rezone, you are giving people the rights to build, five, five, well, 5.8, but really five rural residences within this property, can you condition it? Can it be conditioned so basically that they're out of the overlay?
I think that's an option for the commissioners. Yeah, I don't see why that wouldn't be. Yeah.
If I might jump
Yeah.
in, Commissioners, Will Groves, your planning manager. So we don't have a provision in the code that allows you to require somebody to locate out of the LM zone. I think it's important, and I think the line of questioning may indicate that there's maybe some background that would be helpful. The purpose of the LM zone is not to render structures invisible from these features, the rivers and roads that are indicated. The notion is it creates a two kind of step hierarchy, which is that if you're within a quarter mile, we're going to check out to see if it's visible. And if it's visible, we're going to ask you basically to paint it earth tone colors and have at least some vegetation between you and the feature. So for example, as you drive out to Sisters through the EFU lands, as you go by Friar and out through Cloverdale, those are LM roads. So under the LM zone, I could have a property that has no vegetation and is immediately adjacent to the highway. And what's being asked by the LM zone is I don't paint my house hot pink and I plant a couple trees. So on this property where there's, at least an eighth of a mile between of vegetation, to the extent that in the future that these properties were developed under county zoning, planner would go out to the site as part of a site visit and say, yeah, if this was hot pink, you could probably see it from the road, and therefore you have to paint it earth tone colors. That's sort of the level of analysis. So the goal is not to make these invisible. It's a compatibility effort to try to keep things muted earth tones. And, many structures in the LM zone are, visible from the road. And again, it's a point in time attempt, if major changes are made in vegetation, or topography, something that wasn't visible might become visible. So it's a general overall effort to try to improve the visibility along the corridors rather than an absolute, thou shalt not see this structure.
Thank you for that. Couple more questions following this through. Can you tell me what the surrounding land ownership is?
Yeah, absolutely. So directly to the east, it's federally owned, Deschutes National Forest. The Trout Creek Conservation Tract directly abutting the west property boundary is owned by the Sisters School District. And then again, directly south is the existing Mackenzie Meadows Village neighborhood that's within city limits. Obviously, smaller lots, all privately owned. And then we have, again, northwest corner is the Tollgate subdivision, zoned RR10. And then the north boundary is also federally owned forest zone lands.
Okay. So there's to the east, to the north, it's Forest Service land. Then there's maybe a little corner where it abuts toll gates.
Correct. Yeah, the
Ownership.
northwest corner.
And then on the west, Sister School District.
Correct.
Okay. So, basically the future of this scenic corridor, relies pretty heavily on Forest Service management. In relation, in the area that we're talking about here, that's helpful to understand as well. Okay. S- well, that's great. Thank you. And then on that northern tip as well.
And what I'm, just, I have dial up, but I'm just pointing on, yes, so that's also forest.
Okay. What about the part underneath the text box? Can you make that go away?
This,
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Yeah, so I kind of related to that. I was thinking about highway wildlife habitat connectivity, and so knowing that I mean, running parallel to the highway is probably not the best place for wildlife to be, but in a lot of cases, that's their only option. So just knowing that would be maintained is helpful. It addresses some of the concerns that people raised in their comments. Um, yeah, also kind of trying to understand the regional setting. A lot of the hearings officers' recommendation kind of hinged upon this idea that it's good to have some MUA as a transitional zone between, the city and the more rural uses, and I don't have a good sense of um, overall around, basically, so what we're talking about is the transition from the city of Sisters out into the rural. I don't have a very good sense of overall where there is MUA and RR10 around the city. Um, so maybe if I could ask for the hearing a map that shows both ownership and zoning around the whole city of Sisters, just to kind of get a sense of it. 'Cause, I don't know how the hearings officer was thinking about that, but if they're saying that there should be that MUA transition completely surrounding the city, or if there's a bunch of MUA kind of feathering out from the city on to the east, that's enough, and then we don't have to have it. It's not critically urgent to have that MUA transition on the west side as well. But it would be great to see a map of that regional context.
Yes, absolutely. We'll do that. Thank you.
Um, And can you remind me, so F2 zoning, what is the minimum acreage to build, even one home, one residence?
Yeah, let me pull that up. Let me triple check. So minimum lot area is 80 acres.
Okay. So under that zoning, you can't even build one house right
Cor-
now.
Correct. Yeah, there is one dwelling on the property on the, let's see, tax lot 1203 that was approved in the 90s,
Okay.
1990s as a conditional use. So yeah, that's currently, but correct, the property effectively couldn't be divided
You
any
couldn't build
further.
anything else.
Yeah.
And sorry, where is that current?
I'd call it the southeast corner. There's, we might be able to see it on the aerial map, kind of right in the southeast corner of the subject property.
There's sort of like a cluster of trees or something in that corner. Is that where it is?
Yes, correct.
Um, and am I correct if this was zoned MUA MUA 10, then up to five, 5 residences would be allowed.
Correct.
And can you just tell me about what's allowed, give me a high level understanding of what's allowed outright and what's allowed conditionally in terms of those 5 homes?
Under MUA 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, so MUA 10, obviously single unit dwellings allowed outright. Other allowed uses include non-commercial horse stables. You can have a type 1 home occupation, so very, minor type of home occupation, piano teacher, home occupations conducted within a dwelling. ADUs are an option, or, obviously the new RV as rental dwellings. Those are all permitted outright. And then conditional uses, fairly long list. A guest house, for example, is a conditional use permit. MUA 10, a kennel or veterinary clinic. Let's see, accessory farm dwellings. Commercial activities in conjunction with farm use, those are all conditional uses. Bed and breakfast is a conditional use. Commercial horse stables as well. And there's a few other sort of utility related uses that are conditional in MUA 10.
Okay. So for all of those conditional uses, if this was rezoned to MUA, there would be a subsequent application where the suitability, compatibility would be considered.
Exactly. Yep. They would have to make, compatibility analysis.
Um, uh, my next question is about clustering. So we're going through this. I don't even know what we'd call it, but based on other decisions, other recent land use decisions, we're taking a look at provisions in our comp plan related to clustering. And can you kind of scenario out for me if this property was MUA, if this property was MUA 10, what could or couldn't people do in terms of clustering, or what would they be encouraged or discouraged from doing in relation to clustering?
That
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
Hello again, commissioners. So that is an interesting question at the moment. Certainly, the development would happen under the comp plan at the time of the application. And so our comp plan's in motion. So, a very basic question there is up in the air. Under our understanding, say a year ago, this would be a UGB. So should it be rezoned, it would be a UGB adjacent property, zoned MUA 10 and be eligible for cluster subdivisions. Because it's not in a wildlife area combining zone, that cluster subdivision will require 65% open space and would be eligible for an effective density of 1 unit per 5 acres because it's adjacent to the UGB. In light of some of the discussion that's happened in association with the comp plan, it's increasingly clear that the Division 4 OAR 660 rules apply to this, and there's some specific rules about clustering about the effective zoning that was in place on October 4th, 2000. There's farm and forest requirements. There's limits on the number of total lots that can be created. So I think that my anticipation is that the next substantive cluster subdivision that garners controversy will have some significant questions to ask about how our clustering provisions in Goal 4 interact. And while we have theories about that, I think that's something that there's significant questions about how that would operate. So, I think that there's a reason. A year ago, we would have said 1 unit per 5 acres effective density clustered at, probably at 2 to 3 acre home sites with a 65% open space. You would make that application today or under a future comprehensive plan, potentially modified as, proposed under that process. Much more complicated question. It may not even be possible. And I think there's arguments to be made that it may not be possible under the Division 4 660 rules.
Okay. And under our old formula, when you said 1 unit per 5 acres, that doesn't mean that the units would have to be in a 5 acre, that was a ratio to get to a total number in the cluster, not necessarily a spatial arrangement.
That's correct.
Okay. But there would be a 2 acre minimum, is that?
There's a 2 acre minimum for cluster subdivisions. And as you get into the conditional use criteria that they talk about 2 to 3 acre lots are the target in there and that actually comes out as an effect because there's a requirement to create open space. You want to make these lots, there's a push and pull between the open space requirements, the lotting requirements, the access roads. So it ends up being a pretty tight budgeting exercise to get, it's fairly common for clusters to effectively lose a lot because of the cumulative acreage requirements between the open space and other minimum requirements.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, and it's a part of the reason I'm asking these questions, kind of pursuing this line of thought is, if to take the property owner at their word that their primary intent is to come into the UGB, if this rezone was approved, but they're not selected for the UGB right away, like I'm trying to understand how essentially, a portion of this property could be, essentially envisioned for future urbanization, while at the same time, giving the property owner, some number of units, that they are allowed to, that they're allowed under MUA.
And so that's a great question. If you think about clustering as it's structured in Division 4 and putting aside for the moment, if even this type of clustering would be precluded under the current comp plan or a future comp plan. But, to assume that those legal arguments prevailed and that, in fact, you could do this at all. The notion is with these cluster subdivisions is that they come with a preclusion on the open space. So you end up with at least 65% open space, 2 to 3 acre development lots. And the notion is that preclusion on development for the open space goes away at such time it comes into the city. So this is expressly built with this, and that these lands are urban adjacent, may come into the city, and that at such time that open space parcel will become eligible for development at city densities. It's not mandated. You could have a problem with the homeowners association holding it and really enjoying the open space values associated with it, but it becomes the preclusion for development that would be put in place in the county would evaporate at such time it went into the city.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Thank you. Um, yeah, I mean, that does lead to another question, which is, I know that when a property owner comes in for a specific, a specific land use, a specific development, we have opportunities to condition that development in certain ways to, ensure compatibility, suitability, things like that. Is there, um, when we're looking at a plan amendment zone change application, I mean, are there opportunities to condition an application at that point? And part of the reason I'm thinking about that is, again, getting back to this question of, if the property owner's intent is to be brought into the UGB, could we essentially condition this in ways that if they get the rezone but they're not successful at getting into the UGB, that we're trying to set the development of this property up for long-term compatibility with urban expansion in the future.
It's an interesting question. It's something, it's not strictly precluded, but it has to, as you're coming through the plan amendment zone change, there's a risk of creating effectively a spot zone or a limited use combining zone that says, hey, you're in the MUA 10 zone, but you don't have the full rights and privileges. Here's what that looks like. I know that Aaron Green, our hearings officer, was always really loath to try and do that because of the strange effects that it could create. But I don't know that it's strictly precluded. And in some circumstances, a developer can read the room and recognize that making some sort of voluntary deed arrangement may be key to getting an approval from, a board that might not strictly have criteria that relates to issues. I'm going to turn around and Stephanie Marshall.
See if she was nodding yes or no.
Good morning, Commissioner. Stephanie Marshall, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel. Yes, and I was sitting back there nodding. That is the danger of essentially taking a rezone and creating it, like taking away some of the rights, if you will, or some of the what's already in the code for the MUA 10 zone or the RR 10 zone, and saying, well, you don't get all of these rights, and so now you're essentially, the argument can be made that you're essentially creating a new zone outside of a legislative process, no notice to DLCD, et cetera, et cetera. So there is some danger associated with that, but Will correctly noted that, the developer could read the room and agree voluntarily to make some concessions, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Tread lightly.
Tread lightly. Always a good.
All right. Along the same lines, is there? I actually, this is probably not as more of a concern when I was wondering about the scenic or wildlife corridors. Was I had a question about is it possible to approve basically a portion of the proposed property for plan amendment zone change versus the entire 58 acres.
Mm.
But I don't think I'm as worried about that anymore. Just given the distance from the highway and the surrounding property ownerships. So my last question was just the hearings officer's recommendation said there was substantial numbers of people opposed, supporting. Do we have a specific breakdown of numbers? Kind of on the public input.
Yeah, I could certainly kind of hone in on that too at the hearing, but I've received in the initial hearing just under 200 written comments. We had about 15 people speak at the initial hearing, and I would say majority in opposition, but we have received a handful of comments in favor of the application. But I can certainly break that down for you guys next week.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to know those numbers. I also was tracking very closely that, the hearings officer said, many of the commenters were speaking more to the question of inclusion in the urban growth boundary than about the specifics of this rezone application. So, taking that all into account. But it's helpful to understand how people are thinking about this issue.
Absolutely.
So I have one question. This hearing was at 1 p.m. on April 7th. Was Tommy Brooks here in person?
He was joining us remotely.
He was. Okay, because I believe that that's really something that we are wanting to have the hearings officers here. And I know we've had it in the evening when they're on Zoom, and I feel that's incredibly not as good as of a government transparency situation as having. So I'm really disappointed to hear that he was on Zoom that day, because I would have thought perhaps he could have been here.
If I might speak to it, we certainly have that preference as well. We've struggled to attract and retain hearings officers. And Yeah, and in particular, we try to preclude attorneys who work locally because of conflict of interest problems. So we're
Mhm.
specifically recruiting people who tend to be out of the area. And also in terms of, although, you know, we have received some support in some years for hearings officer funds from the board. I mean, cost control is an important
Mhm.
aspect of that. So it definitely a preference for us as well to have significant increased cost to the operation of the hearing, as well as struggling to find hearings officers who are willing to do that work. So something that we've worked on over time, and and definitely share your concern that it's best if they're here.
I mean, it's one day, isn't it? It's one day, and I really, I know this has been an incredibly controversial issue in the Sisters Nugget. And so I just, I would hope in the future that, come to us about the cost or something. But I do believe that having them in the room is much more respectful of the decision that they're making.
My question.
Well, that was very educational, just kind of thinking through this big process here. And as I say, it's just a work session on the topic. Public hearing will be opening up on August 6th on this topic. Anything else?
I guess, you know, one additional question was, so, you know, I read the hearings officer's recommendation. As I try to review the rest of the record for this item, are there particular pieces that you would point my attention to that you think are especially important to to read or understand?
Yeah, we'll kind of summarize sort of the hearings officer recommendation in the presentation. Yeah, I would say if there's any specific things you're looking at, and I took a lot of the notes here on what you had mentioned, Commissioner Chang, and we'll definitely highlight those in the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank
that'll
you.
be good.
And to that point, you know, these types of forest rezones.
Mhm.
So this is, there's a lot of matters of first impression, both locally
Yeah.
and statewide basis. So you saw the hearings officer having to do a lot of primary reasoning here rather than reliance on case law.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you can see the applicant and lawyered opponents having some significant disagreements about how those provisions work. And an impression I took away from the hearings officer's decision as frequently his conclusion was that there wasn't a robust argument made to the contrary, and therefore he concluded with the applicant. And I think we should anticipate opponents coming with robust arguments in response to those places of identified deficit in their argument. And so I think there'll be a lot of legal discussion, and wouldn't be surprising if this proceeded on to the state courts because of the numerous matters of first impression.
Good to know. Like, yeah, I mean, we've seen a whole lot of rezones of EFU zone, high desert land, irrigated, non-irrigated, but this is, yeah, I think we grappling with what the state land use planning system's intentions are for forest land is I can only remember maybe once or twice in the last 5 years that we've looked at things like this. So it's good. Good to prepare thoroughly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So at this time, other items. Anything, Nick, specifically? Okay. Commissioner Adair?
No.
Nothing?
No.
Okay. So a letter from Department of State Lands referring to the BLM classification decision in lieu lands for Deschutes County for the Bureau of Land. I'm sorry, from the Bureau of Land Management to the DSL. So it's just like the official letter. It was already in the news last week, but this is the official letter referring to 80 acres transferred to the Department of State Lands from BLM in the urban growth boundary of the city of La Pine. So as I said, I don't know if we all got it, but it was already public knowledge, but it was just to Deschutes County, yeah, to myself, Commissioner.
I received as well.
Okay, yeah, so I mean, we all may have got it, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I guess one thing I'd like to raise is that now the Oregon the governor has scheduled a special session on transportation funding. And there's this very basic question of, the legislature approved a budget for ODOT, but then did not approve any kind of a funding package large enough to cover the approved budget for the biennium. So, um, counties are not going to be at the very forefront of that debate about the mini package that the governor is proposing for the special session, but there will be I do believe legislators are going to be interested in what local governments have to say about this mini package. And I'm wondering if we want to schedule, basically a discussion at some point for our Board of Commissioners and, decide whether we want to weigh in formally or not. If so, then what do we want to say?
Commissioners, I can just offer that Doug Riggs, our lobbyist, will be here to provide a legislative update on next Monday, August 4th. And so that'll be a good opportunity to learn about some of for us to answer some of the questions that you asked at the last meeting about health services funding, but we can also begin to talk about and prepare, ask the board how they would like to prepare for the special session, which I think is scheduled for August 29th, if I'm recalling correctly.
That's correct.
That'd be great.
Right.
One other thing to, put on the to-do list to kind of unpack a little bit during that discussion with Doug would be Senate Bill 1154.
Okay. And that was the community justice,
No, 1154
Water.
was the Groundwater Protection Act reform bill.
okay. Oh, right. Okay.
The Association of Oregon Counties, is real focused on this. I'm sure we already got an update recently, just kind of a survey with where we think we're at and what we advocated for. So I'm sure AOC will dial in real quick on this as a statewide organization also.
Yeah, I checked with Mallory and they are preparing to react. Basically, they're, again, cities and counties are not going to drive this legislative mini package, but they're preparing to react. But it would be helpful for them to know if this particular Board of Commissioners, had, was supportive, not supportive, had specific things that they wanted out of the mini package.
But I'm sure our road director will be right in the middle of it also.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we have that discussion, I think it would be great to have Chris right in the middle of it.
Okay, anything else for other items?
No?
See, and then we have executive session today, property.
The Deschutes County Board of Commissioners will now convene an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.660 subsection 2E, which allows the board to meet in order to discuss real property negotiations. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made, and at the conclusion, we will open the doors and invite the audience back to the meeting.
Okay, we'll be in an executive session. We'll get the Okay, so we are back following executive session. Please just proceed as discussed. Is there anything else for this board meeting? I think the opening of the county fair is tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
10:45, we're supposed to be there.
Oh, be there at 10:45. Okay, so
And yes, our next meeting will be Monday.
yeah, Monday afternoon. Okay. Seeing nothing else, meeting adjourned. Thank you.